I was just sitting there as we were meditating and just feeling so joyful with all of you and thinking I could go another round of Mahashivaratri and we could just stay like that all night and just be together in that meditation. So thank you for feeding me all of that energy and sharing it with the gurus, and hopefully we can share some of that right back. Tonight, the passage that I wanted to speak about is from chapter 9, verse 22. It's one of my favorite quotes from the Bhagavad Gita. And the quote is, "To those who meditate on me as their very own, their hearts ever united with me in incessant worship, I supply their deficiencies and make permanent their gains." And this is such a powerful quote, I think, because it distills us down to the very essence of the spiritual path and of our relationship with God, which is love. If we can love God truly with all of our hearts, I just love that line, to meditate on God as our very own and truly understand what that means, to be in incessant worship with the divine, in incessant conversation with the divine, in communion, attunement, and connection with that, then all of the vrittis, all of the messiness, all of the chaos of our life, everything that keeps us bound, the promise that God himself gives to us is, I will supply your deficiencies and make permanent your gains. All that you are lacking that keeps you from God, God will supply to you. And all that uplifts you and brings you closer to the divine, God will solidify that in you. All you have to do is love God. And it's so simple on one hand, and it's just the very essence of what we're doing on the spiritual path, which is why it's such a powerful quote for us to meditate on and to think about. It just really brings us to the very essence of how much God loves us and how we can approach the divine. And as I was thinking about this quote today, the first story that came to mind is the story that Master tells in one of his recordings of the man who enters heaven and meets God for the first time, and God says to him, what can I give you to make you happier in your next life? And he says, well, I'd love to be rich. I'd love to be very, very wealthy. And God says, okay, and sends him back down into the world, and he becomes very wealthy very quickly, but he dies very young. So he comes back and he meets God in heaven again, and God says, what happened? What do you need now? And he stands there and he says, well, I was very wealthy, but I didn't get to enjoy my wealth. So this time I want to be wealthy and I want to live a very long life. And so God says, okay, and sends him back down into the world. And he lives a very long life and he's very wealthy, but he realizes that he's very lonely. So at the end of his life, here he is again, back in the cycle with God, and God says, what do you need this time? He says, this time I'd like to be wealthy and live a long life, and I'd love to have a beautiful wife. And of course you can see where we're going. I won't regale you with every episode of it, but his wife turns out to be a relationship that doesn't quite work out. And first she's not, then he wants someone who's beautiful, but she leaves him. So then he comes back, and now I want someone who will be with me for a long time, and then they're not very happy, and just on, over and over again. And it starts to sound like not only incarnation after incarnation of our life, but even just the mental dialogue that goes on in this incarnation, in our day-to-day life. If only this could be different, if only I could get that job, if only my children would follow this path or that path, whatever it may be, that if we could just get things right, if the vrittis could just quiet down, then I'll be happy. Then I'll have time to find God. Then I'll have time to be at peace. And if we do this, we're missing the point, just like Swami Kriyananda talks about with our karma. If we try and attack just one little thread of karma, I was thinking about, I forget the name of the monster, but the monster in the Greek myth of Hercules, where he cuts off the neck of the monster and two more heads grow, and he cuts off, say it again? The Hydra, yes, Hydra the monster, and he cuts off the neck, and two more heads grow out, and on and on and on. If we're trying to come at every single individual vritti, every need, every want, every desire, just like that man who returns to heaven over and over again, and God says, what can I do for you this time? That's the beauty of the love of God. For us, it seems like a little bit of a trick, because here we are as yogis trying to find our way out of the carnival of life, the maze of Maya. But the trick of God is that You'll get what you're asking for. You'll get what you're craving, what you need. You can come back as many times as you need in order to learn the lessons, to find the fulfillment. The end of that story, which Yogananda so sweetly shares, is after so many trials and errors at finding true happiness, the man finally returns one last time, and God says, "What do you need this time?" And the man looks up and he says, "I need nothing. I need nothing but you, Lord." And then he enters into the kingdom of heaven. And that's the journey that each one of us is taking along our path. But the secret throughout the midst of that, just as Swamiji says, if we try and go at every single individual deficiency, if we try to go at every single trial and error along the way, the path becomes cumbersome. And we have a lot that we need to carry, and we get loaded down and weighed down by all of that struggle. And the freedom on the other side of that is simply the secret of loving God. And it's such a bhakti spirit. I'm a bhakti at heart. I love to just talk about loving God. I always joke, I can't wait to be one of those, older women walking around in our community with a little wagon full of mortis and just bringing my mortis with me everywhere I go and setting them out and having tea and just loving God, being present in the divine and sharing on such a personal level, coming to the Divine Mother as your very own. And that's what this means. That's what this Gita quote is asking us to do. What does it mean to meditate on God as our very own? Well, how does the child come to his mother? When the child comes to their mother and they're very young, I was just reading a beautiful interpretation of this quote last night, and in the description of it, this writer was talking about how when a child is very little and they're crawling on their hands and knees to the mother, and the mother scoops them up in her arms, whatever that child needs, she gives to that child everything that she has, anything that she can do to help that child to become contented and joyful and happy. The mother surrounds that child in all of that love because the child is grasping for it, yearning for it, looking up, raising their arms to be scooped up in that love. And then as the child begins to get a little bit of independence and grow some into their adolescence, and they begin to have a sense of their self and their ego, the mother takes a step back. Go, make your mistakes, live out in the world, find your own path. And the love never wavers, but the mother takes just a little step back. And then as the child grows older and older into their adulthood, the mother just continues to step back more and more. And it's not that the love is gone, but as if we're not asking for the mother's presence in our life, if we're not that little child reaching up with our hands saying, "Scoop me up, give me everything that I need." Just like that story of Ganesha, when he's eating everything off the table, everything in the kingdom. Remember the story, the king says, "Eat until your heart's content." That was his mistake, and Ganesha starts eating everything that he can see, everything off the table itself, everything off the walls. And the king runs to Parvati and says, "I don't know what to do." And Parvati brings one drop of milk, and Ganesha is contented. One drop of mother's milk, that's all that's needed to soothe. That's what was needed to soothe his heart. And the same is true for each one of us, if we can just remember to be that little child, and the promise that comes at the end of that, "I will supply your deficiencies." There's nothing that we need to do besides loving Divine Mother, besides giving our hearts completely to God. Everything gets swept up in that love. And the great ones love us so much. Just the other day, a few of us were taking a drive through the Pune University grounds, and we went for a walk, and Dr. Aditya was telling us a story. I won't remember all of the details, but there was an English soldier, I believe, or official who was there, and he'd somehow killed a few of I believe it was students, a few of the students, and as a result, he was then killed Ananda Ma was walking around the grounds of Pune University, and she stopped right where this building was, where all of this took place. And she stopped and just prayed and meditated for a moment and then continued on. And her devotee said, "What were you doing?" And she said, "The soul of that soldier, of that English official, was still here, and he was feeling so much heartbreak and heartache for what he had done. And I was freeing him." And it's such, when he was telling me that story, my heart just burst open because it's such a sweet act of compassion. That's how much the masters love us. They're just waiting right there to scoop us up, to free us of our delusion. If we stop asking, let me just try it this way. Let me just get everything right. Well, let me just try being wealthy. Well, let me live a little bit longer. Or whatever it comes down to in our life, whatever we're boiling down to. Just today we were talking a lot about faith and how every spiritual trial, every challenge that we face, at least I find this true in my own life, distills down to this one singular question: how much faith do I have in God? Because every challenge that we approach doesn't mean that we don't face challenges, but if we have faith in God, we're walking hand in hand through those challenges. That even though it's difficult, even though it may be a struggle, even though we may not know what's coming on the other hand, if we have faith in God, then everything will work out for our greatest good. That no matter what it is that we're challenged with in our life, we find that Divine Mother is right there holding us. Just as we said, all of those vrittis, all of our deficiencies, I will supply your deficiencies and make permanent your gains. That's the only question. How much can I love God? How much can I share with the divine? I'll end with just one more story to illustrate this point. You know, when I was thinking about divine Ananda Moima, this is a story many of you may know, but there's a story where she was setting up a picnic with all of her disciples, and so they spent the morning and they got everything prepared for the picnic, and they were driving out, and Ananda Moima was notoriously known for just moving with the flow and moving wherever her heart was asking her to, so you never quite knew what was going to happen with Ananda Moima. And here they were, and they'd set up this whole picnic, and they were driving through the countryside trying to find a place to picnic, and they started walking through the meadow and nothing was feeling right, and they just kept kind of moving, and one of the disciples was starting to get a little bit restless and starting to get a little bit irritated. And then they find a spot under a tree and they sit down and they set up the whole picnic. And just as they were about to start enjoying their picnic, Ananda Moima stands up and she says, "We have to go." And they pack everything up and they start walking away, and they walk over to another tree, and she stands underneath this tree and she holds out her hands, and a little bird falls into her hands and it dies. And she prays and then, puts the bird down, and then she says, "We can go home now." And she said, the whole reason that we came here today was because I heard the soul call of that little bird, and I came to help it move on, transition into its next incarnation. And when I was thinking about that quote today, or this quote today in this story, I was thinking, each one of us, we have a choice in every moment of our life. We can be that devotee, that restless devotee who's standing right next to Divine Mother herself, but is restless. We're missing it. Who's just wanting things to work out the way that we need them to set our picnic up because that's what we're supposed to do. That's what's next in line. I put all the effort into making it. Let's enjoy it. And missing all of the divine bliss that's standing right there, or we could be that little bird whose heart was pointedly focused, singularly focused on Divine Mother, and fell into Divine Mother's arms herself in its last breath, feeling Divine Mother. And that is the promise of this quote. Meditate on me as your very own. Call out to Divine Mother in every moment in incessant worship, and I will supply your deficiencies and make permanent your gains. Just like that little bird, could you imagine falling into the arms of Divine Mother in your very last breath? I like to think that little bird probably didn't need any other incarnations, because to die in the arms of Divine Mother, well, where else would we want to be? But we could be that restless devotee right here, right on the sideline, missing the point, having to work through every single one of those vrittis, or we can come back and remember the truth, the divine romance. Yogananda tells us that how should we love God? We should love God as the miser loves money and as the drowning man loves or yearns for his breath. Just like the story of that sadhu, one of the sadhus asks his disciple, says, how can I truly love God with all of my heart? And he takes him and he puts him down and pushes him down into water until he's gasping for breath, just about to, lose consciousness. And he pulls him up and he says, when you want God more than you want air in that moment, then you know that you're loving God. And that's what we're striving for. And that's what this quote is challenging us to do. And Divine Mother, she raises her energy to meet us there. Really, in fact, her energy is always here, but she is right there meeting us, cheering us on if we can step into that. and to know that everything will be burned up in that ultimate fire of divine love. And that ultimate fire, that's what Yogananda tells us in our meditation, Kriya Yoga, is the ultimate fire, right? That when we can offer all of our energy up through the heart into God, then we are truly living in freedom, in perfect bliss. Then we're falling into the arms of Divine Mother, each one of us, that little bird. So I think I'll end there. Thank you.